November 2nd, 1944. 25 zeros. Aero 0 feet above the sprawling lunar synthetic oil plant near Merseburg, Germany. The air is thin, cold, and violent. Inside the cramped cockpit of his P-51 Mustang, First Lieutenant Bruce Carr fights the controls. The stick shudders in his gloved hand, a constant vibration that travels up his arm and into his teeth. His magnificent machine, which he'd nicknamed Asterisk, Angel's playmate, Asterisk is no longer playing. It's in a brawl. Around him the sky is a chaotic canvas of smoke, fire, and metal. The deep, throated roar of his Packard Merlin engine is a familiar comfort, but it's nearly drowned out by the cacophony of war. The sharp, percussive asterisk thump, thump, thump asterisk of his 6.50 caliber machine guns firing in short, controlled bursts, the high, pitched shriek of passing aircraft, and the dreaded, hollow asterisk crump asterisk of German flak shells detonating, peppering the sky with greasy black puffs of death. This is what the 8th Air Force calls Flak Alley, and it's living up to its name. Carr's mission, along with the rest of the 354th Fighter Group, the famous Pioneer Mustang Group, is to protect the heavy B-17 bombers below. But today, the Luftwaffe is out in force. They rose to meet the American Armada like angry hornets, swarms of Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf Fw 190s. Their yellow noses a flash of deadly color against the cold blue. Carr, already an ace with 5 confirmed kills, is a predator in his element. His eyes, honed by months of combat, are constantly scanning, a flick to the left, checking his wingman, a glance in the rearview mirror, searching for bandits on his 6, a quick look down at his instruments, then back up at the swirling dogfight. He spots a Bf-109 maneuvering onto the tail of a friendly bomber. He banks hard, the G-force pressing him deep into his seat, his vision tunneling. He lines up the German fighter in his gyro gun sight, leading the target just so. His thumb presses the firing stud. A stream of tracer rounds reaches out, stitching a fiery line across the Messerschmitt's wing root. A flicker of orange, then a blossom of black smoke. The enemy pilot bails out, a tiny figure tumbling from the mortally wounded plane. Another victory, but there's no time for celebration. A voice, frantic and distorted, crackles in his headset. Asterisk bandit, 6 o'clock high. Asterisk before Carr can react. His world explodes. A series of sledgehammer blows slams into his Mustang. The canopy shatters, sending shards of plexiglass swirling into the cockpit and sucking the warm air out into the -40-degree sky. The instrument panel disintegrates in a shower of sparks and broken glass. A searing pain rips through his leg. He looks down. The cockpit floor is awash in hydraulic fluid and, more alarmingly, fuel. The sweet, sickening smell fills his lungs. His beautiful Angel's playmate is dying. The Merlin engine sputters, coughs, and then seizes with a final, grinding shriek. The only sound now is the terrifying rush of wind past the shattered canopy. He is a glider, a 4-ton brick falling out of the sky. Below him, the patchwork fields of enemy Germany spin closer and closer. There is no choice, he has to get out. Panic is a luxury he cannot afford. Training kicks in, a cold, methodical sequence drilled into him and every other pilot. With his good leg, Bruce Carr kicks at the buckled remnants of the canopy frame, pushing himself up and out of the seat. The wind rips at him, a physical force trying to tear him apart. He's tumbling through the air, intertwined with his dying Mustang. He shoves himself clear of the fuselage, away from the spinning tail. He pulls the D-ring on his parachute harness. For a terrifying second, nothing happens. Then, with a loud asterisk crack asterisk that echoes in the sudden silence, the silk canopy blossoms above him. He is jerked upwards, the harness digging painfully into his shoulders and groin. The world, once a chaotic blur of motion and violence, is now serene, almost peaceful. The only sound is a gentle whistling of the wind through his chute's risers. Below him, Asterisk Angel's playmate Asterisk continues its final, silent dive, a silver glint disappearing into the dark green of a forest before erupting in a distant, bright orange flash, followed moments later by the faint, percussive asterisk boom asterisk of its impact. He hangs there, a solitary pendulum under a canopy of white silk, a perfect target against the blue sky. He can see German soldiers on the ground, small figures pointing up at him. He hears the distant barking of dogs. They know where he is. They know where he's going to land. He fights the instinct to just drift. He pulls on the risers, trying to spill air from one side of the chute, trying to steer himself away from the open fields and toward a dense patch of woods. The ground rushes up fast. He remembers the training. Feet and knees together, roll on impact, but his wounded leg betrays him. He hits the earth with a jarring thud, a fresh spike of agony shooting up from his ankle. For a moment he lies there, breathless, the wind knocked out of him, tangled in the shroud lines of his parachute. But there is no time. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, cuts through the pain. He has to move. **. He frantically unbuckles the harness, his fingers clumsy with cold. The massive silk canopy is a death sentence, a giant white flag pointing directly to his location. He gathers the billowing material, stuffing it, wrestling with it, and drags it into a thick, thorny bush, covering it as best he can with leaves and broken branches. It's a pathetic attempt at camouflage, but it's all he has time for. He checks his pockets, a Zippo lighter, a pack of cigarettes, a small escape kit with a compass and a few maps. No food, no water. His service pistol is gone, likely lost in the chaos of the bailout. He is alone, injured, and effectively unarmed deep inside the Third Reich. The barking is close now. Voices shouting in German drift through the trees. He has to run. Limping heavily, he pushes himself deeper into the forest, away from the crash site, away from the parachute. Every snapped twig, every rustle of leaves under his feet sounds like a gunshot in the still air. He moves not with a plan, but with pure animal instinct, away, just get away. The sun is setting, casting long, menacing shadows through the trees. He finds a shallow, leaf-choked ditch and crawls half, falls into it, pulling dead leaves and branches over his body. He lies perfectly still, his heart hammering against his ribs. He can hear the search party moving through the woods, their voices and the panting of their dogs getting closer, then agonizingly fading away again. The world goes dark. The cold begins to seep into his bones, a deep, relentless chill that is more than just the November air. It is the cold of absolute isolation. For Bruce Carr, the ace pilot, the war in the sky is over. A new war, a silent, desperate battle for survival, has just begun. The first light of dawn was not a comfort, but a threat. It crept through the tangled branches above, a cold grey illumination that revealed a world drained of colour. Bruce Carr awoke not from sleep, but from a state of shivering semi-consciousness. His body felt like a cage of ice, and the pain in his leg, now swollen and stiff, had become a dull, throbbing drumbeat that echoed with his pulse. Thirst was a fire in his throat. He pushed himself up, his movements slow and agonizing. Every muscle screamed in protest. The sounds of the search party were long gone, but the feeling of being hunted was branded into his mind. He knew the rules of escape and evasion. Move at night, hide during the day. Find water first, then shelter, then food. He unpocketed his small compass. The needle quivered, then settled. West towards France, towards Allied lines. It was a laughable distance, hundreds of miles over hostile terrain. But it was a direction. It was hope. He spent the day hidden in a thicket, watching, listening. He saw a farmer drive a cart down a distant dirt road. He saw a flight of German fighters, likely from the same group that had shot him down, returning to their base. Each sighting was a reminder of his vulnerability. When dusk finally fell, he began to move. It was a torturous, shambling crawl more than a walk. He favored his injured leg, using a sturdy branch as a crude crutch. His first priority was water. After an hour of agonizing progress, he stumbled upon a drainage ditch at the edge of a field. The water was muddy, stagnant, and flecked with scum, but to him it was life. He lay on his stomach and drank deeply, ignoring the metallic taste, feeling the blessed liquid soothe his raw throat. One day bled into the next. He became a creature of the dusk and dawn, a ghost haunting the edges of civilization. During the day, he'd find the deepest, most impassable part of a forest and burrow into the undergrowth, forcing himself to remain still even as his body cramped and the cold gnawed at him. At night, he moved west. Hunger became a constant, hollow ache in his belly. On the third night, desperation drove him to crawl on his hands and knees into a harvested vegetable patch. His frozen fingers dug into the cold, hard earth, searching for anything the farmers had missed. He found a few small, half-frozen turnips. He ate them raw, the gritty, earthy taste a grim feast. Paranoia became his only companion. The snap of a twig could be a soldier's footstep. The hoot of an owl could be a signal. He saw the enemy everywhere. He would freeze for an hour, heart pounding, convinced a shadow was a man, only for the rising moon to reveal it as a twisted tree stump. He was growing weaker. The meager sustenance from the turnips was not enough to fuel his body or fight the relentless cold. His flight suit was torn, his face was covered in a dirty, itchy stubble, and his injured leg was a constant source of misery. He knew with a chilling certainty that he could not last much longer like this. Capture or death from exposure was inevitable. On the fourth night, huddled in a ditch near a paved road, he heard a new sound. It was not the high-altitude drone of bombers or the passing whine of a truck. It was a sound he knew intimately, a sound that was part of his very soul, the roar of an aircraft engine. But this was different. It wasn't flying overhead. It was closer, lower, and intermittent. The sound of an engine being revved, tested, and throttled back. He cautiously peered over the edge of the ditch. Through a break in the trees, maybe a mile away, he saw it. A string of dim lights, the unmistakable outline of a hangar, and the dark shapes of aircraft parked on a hardstand. It was a German airfield, the most dangerous place in the world for him to be. Yet as he watched a mechanic in greasy overalls walk past a silhouetted Focke-Wulf fighter, a thought, wild and utterly insane, sparked in the depths of his exhausted mind. It was a seed of desperation, of unbelievable audacity. An airfield had guards, fences, and soldiers, but it also had airplanes. For 2 more days and nights, Bruce Carr remained hidden, his entire world shrinking to the German airfield. It was no longer a place to avoid, but a problem to be solved. He became an intelligence officer of one, his mission to learn the rhythm of this enemy nest. He was close enough to smell the exhaust fumes and hear the clank of tools on metal. From his cold, damp observation post in a stand of pines, he watched the daily routine, the shifts of the sentries, their predictable patrol routes, the movements of the mechanics and ground crew, the times when the field was busiest, and more importantly, the times when it was quietest. The airfield was a secondary satellite strip, likely used for dispersal and maintenance. The activity was sporadic. He saw Bf-109s and a few Ju-88 bombers. But what held his attention, what fueled the insane idea blooming in his mind, was a lone Focke-Wulf Fw 190. It was the butcher bird, the Luftwaffe's formidable radial engine fighter, a machine he had faced in combat many times. This particular one sat apart from the others, near a small maintenance shed. He watched mechanics work on it during the day, tinkering with the engine, checking the control surfaces. But at night, it was often left alone, a dark, lethal shape under the cold starlight. The plan was suicide. He knew it, every rational part of his brain screamed it. He didn't know the Fw 190's cockpit layout. The instruments would be in German. The startup sequence was a mystery. Even if he could get it started, taking off from an unfamiliar, unlit runway in the dark was a recipe for disaster. And if he was caught, the consequences were unthinkable. A captured airman was a prisoner of war. A captured airman trying to steal a German fighter would be a spy, subject to immediate execution. But what was the alternative? To slowly freeze or starve to death in a ditch, to be torn apart by dogs, to surrender and face the grim uncertainty of a POW camp. The Focke-Wulf represented a chance. A 1 in a million chance, perhaps, but a chance nonetheless. It was a choice between a certain, slow death and a spectacular, fast one. For a fighter pilot like Bruce Carr, that was no choice at all. On the night of his 6th day on the ground, a cold, driving rain began to fall. It was perfect. The rain would muffle sound, reduce visibility, and make the guards miserable and less alert, more inclined to huddle in their shelters. This was it. It was now or never. Waiting for the darkest hour just before dawn, he began to move. He left his makeshift crutch behind, the pain in his leg a distant signal, drowned out by the thunder of adrenaline. He moved from shadow to shadow, a wraith in a torn flight suit, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He timed his movements to the passing of the lone sentry patrolling the perimeter fence. When the guard's back was turned, Carr scrambled under the wire, the barbs tearing at his clothes. He was inside. He moved silently across the damp grass toward the isolated FW-190. The plane loomed over him, bigger than he'd imagined, smelling of oil, metal, and rain. The cockpit was covered with a canvas tarp. His fingers, numb with cold, fumbled with the fastenings. He pulled the cover back, hoisted himself up onto the wing root. A spike of fire shot through his injured ankle, but he bit back a cry and slid into the pilot's seat. He was in, the cockpit was alien yet familiar. A stick, rudder pedals, a throttle quadrant, but the gauges were all wrong, the labels a foreign language, asterisk Kraftstoff, Leiddruck, Oldruck, asterisk he didn't have time to decipher it all. He just had to make it fly. The cockpit of the Focke-Wulf was a black hole, a nest of foreign switches and incomprehensible labels. Carr's breath misted in the frigid air. He couldn't risk using his lighter. A single flicker of light could bring the entire airfield down upon him. He had to do this by touch and by memory. Not his own memory, but the collective knowledge of every pilot who had ever studied an enemy aircraft. He knew from intelligence briefings that German planes, like American ones, followed a certain logic. There had to be a master switch, a fuel pump, a magneto selector, a primer, and a starter. His gloved fingers danced across the instrument panel, feeling for the familiar shapes, a large toggle switch that felt like a master switch. He flipped it, nothing happened, no lights, no sounds. His heart sank. Was the battery dead? Had he come all this way for nothing? He ran his hand further down the panel, his fingers brushing against a series of smaller switches that felt like circuit breakers. He systematically flipped them all on. Then he tried the master switch again. This time, a faint hum vibrated through the airframe, and the dim backlighting on a few of the gauges flickered to life, casting an eerie green glow on the German words. Fuel, he needed fuel. His eyes scanned the cockpit, and he found a lever with a shape that suggested a fuel selector. He moved it to what he hoped was the main tank. Next, the primer. He found a T-shaped handle, similar to the one in his Mustang. He pulled it and pushed it several times, injecting raw fuel into the engine cylinders. Now for the moment of truth. He located a button guarded by a small spring-loaded cover, a universal design to prevent accidental engagement. The starter. He took a deep, shuddering breath. This was the loudest part. This would wake the dead. He braced himself, placed his thumb on the button and pushed. The propeller jerked. A cough. A metallic clang. Then the huge 14-cylinder BMW-8, 101 radial engine sputtered to life with a series of deafening backfires that sounded like cannon shots in the Preed. On stillness. A cloud of thick, acrid smoke belched from the exhausts. He immediately saw lights flick on in a nearby barracks. Shouts echoed across the wet tarmac. He didn't have minutes. He had seconds. He slammed the canopy shut, the plexiglass sealing him inside the vibrating beast. Without time for a proper warm-up, he pushed the throttle forward. The butcher bird roared, a deep, guttural snarl that was completely different from the refined howl of his Merlin engine. The plane surged forward, lurching clumsily as he struggled to steer with the unfamiliar rudder pedals. He wasn't even sure which way the main runway was. He just aimed the nose toward the darkest part of the field, a long, open stretch he'd observed from the woods. The plane bounced and skittered across the grass, not the runway. A guard tower flashed by his wingtip. He saw the muzzle flashes of machine, gunfire stitching the darkness behind him. He kept the throttle pinned, fighting to keep the wings level. The tail came up. The rumbling of the wheels on the rough ground smoothed out. He was gaining speed. He eased back on the stick, the controls feeling heavy and unfamiliar. The FW-190 lifted off the ground, not with the grace of his Mustang, but with a brutish raw power. He was airborne. He retracted the landing gear, the thud of the wheels locking into the fuselage a small victory. Keeping low, treetop level, he pushed the nose west. The German countryside, his prison for the last week, streaked by beneath him in a dark, indistinct blur. He was flying, he had done it, he had stolen a Nazi warplane, but his ordeal was far from over. He was flying a German fighter with German markings, heading directly toward the front lines, where Allied gunners on the ground and Allied pilots in the sky were trained to shoot aircraft just like his out of the sky without asking questions. Part 2. Climbing into the grey dawn, Bruce Carr was a man caught between two worlds, a paradox of silk and steel. He was an American pilot, but he was wrapped in the metal skin of his enemy. The Focke-Wulf flew beautifully, a testament to German engineering. It was responsive, powerful, and exuded a sense of lethal purpose. But every rivet, every gauge, was a reminder of his perilous situation. Below him, the shattered landscape of the Western Front began to unfold, a pockmarked, cratered no man's land that separated the German army from the advancing Allies. His immediate problem was identification. To the German gunners he was flying away from, he was a deserter to be shot down. To the Allied gunners he was flying toward, he was an enemy attacker to be annihilated. He had no radio, or at least no way of knowing how to operate the German one, so he couldn't talk to anyone. He was a ghost in the machine, visible to all, understood by none. He considered his options. Flying high and fast would get him there quicker, but would make him a prime target for Allied fighters on patrol. Flying low was safer from aircraft, but put him in the crosshairs of every anti-aircraft battery on the front. He opted for a middle ground, staying just above the morning mist, hoping to use the cloud cover to his advantage. As he crossed what he judged to be the front lines, the ground erupted. Puffs of black smoke, the telltale sign of Allied attack, blossomed around him. The gunners were good. Shrapnel rattled against his fuselage. He was being welcomed home with a barrage of high explosives. He threw the Fw-190 into a series of violent, evasive maneuvers, jinking left and right, diving and climbing. The robust German airframe took the punishment, but Carr knew his luck wouldn't last. He had to signal his friendly intentions, and he had to do it in a way that was universally understood by fighter pilots. He remembered the pre-flight briefings, the recognition signals. The one gesture that meant "I am in distress," or "I am friendly," was to lower your landing gear. It was a sign of submission, an aerial white flag. Praying the Allied gunners knew this, and praying the German landing gear system was as straightforward as it seemed. He located the lever marked with a wheel icon. He moved it. There was a clunk and a change in the airflow as the gear dropped down and locked into place. He then began to rock his wings back and forth, another signal of non-hostile intent. He flew this way for what felt like an eternity, a crippled bird begging not to be shot. The flak subsided. He dared to hope they understood. Then he saw them, two dots, high and to his right, growing larger by the second. They resolved into the unmistakable shape of P-51 Mustangs, his own kin. But their silver wings glinted with menace. They dove on him, their guns silent for now, bracketing him, one on each wingtip. He could see the pilots in their cockpits, staring at him, their expressions a mixture of confusion and aggression. A P-51 pilot did not expect to see a Focke-Wulf with its gear down, rocking its wings over Allied territory. Carr stayed perfectly still, his hands steady on the controls, not making any sudden moves. He was at their mercy. One of the Mustang pilots flew closer, so close Carr could see the squadron markings. It was a plane from his own group, the 354th Pioneers. He didn't know the pilot, but he knew the insignia. He just kept rocking his wings, the landing gear down, a plea in mechanical language. After a tense standoff that lasted for miles, one of the Mustang pilots seemed to make a decision. He pulled up and flew ahead, waggling his own wings as if to say, "Follow me." Carr's heart leaped. They were escorting him. They were taking him home. Following his new guardian angel, Bruce Carr, the American ace in a stolen German butcher bird, headed for the first friendly airfield he could find.